And hello, my fabulous students. This is your favorite teacher, Mr. Jacobson. I'm excited to be with you today. Today, we're going to talk about the Age of Reason, the Enlightenment period. It's this idea where political ideas start coming together and they try to figure out, okay, based on all the ideas from the past, what is the best form of government? And many of these ideas are going to inspire the founding fathers of the great country of America, and it's going to open up a plethora of ideas and possibilities for what can a country and a people accomplish if they all have uh, individual rights, and some of them cannot be taken away by government. It's believed that these rights, they are created with these rights, and they will die with these rights regardless of what a government thinks. Let's begin. So here we are. Okay, so the definition of enlightenment means to shine a light on. During the enlightenment period, a scientific method was applied. We talked about that earlier. The Enlightenment was a time when people were optimistic about their ability to improve their lives. It was a culmination of hundreds of years of revolutionary changes that took place during the Renaissance, the Reformation, the first stage of globalism, and the scientific revolution. The first stage of globalism is pretty much the age of discovery, which we went over already. And the Enlightenment spread from England to France and then through other places as well, including the Americas. So here's just a little timeline here. You can see from Isaac Newton down to the Napoleonic Wars, who are the great thinkers and when did their ideas come to pass. So there was a group of people called the philosophers, and philosophers mean lover of wisdom. The philosophers were a group of 18th century intellectuals. They promoted reason, knowledge, and education as the way to overcome superstition and ignorance. Many of the philosophers wrote plays, novels, and reference books to avoid open confrontation with the church. So here are people who believe in using their reasoning and to not just agree to what everyone else has agreed to for centuries. They believe in challenging, and they made their ideas known, but some of them weren't as bold in challenging the church, but they usually did it through, kind of unique ways. Maybe they wrote like plays, and the plays poke fun of the church, etc. So they had Enlightenment Academies. They were founded to provide a place for intellectuals to develop and spread their ideas. By the middle of the 18th century, there were hundreds of academies throughout Europe and its colonies. They were supported by both royal and private benefactors. So we now have universities popping up, and these universities are for Enlightenment ideas. So the Enlightenment ideas are starting to actually become very popular with the people of its time. We have a man, his name is Denis Diderot, and he is going to do something pretty bold. He's going to create it's an encyclopedia, but they call it Encyclopedia. And it's a collection of new ideas and new knowledge that scientists of the Enlightenment period had discovered. So he's going to collect all these ideas that have been discovered within the last 200-300 years of his time, and he's going to compile them into one book, or to a series of books, I should say. And in these books, they're going to cover topics like religious tolerance, civil liberties, contractional government, and republicanism. Many members of the French aristocracy considered the ideas found in the encyclopedia a threat to their way of life, because it's saying the encyclopedia was more about the people have a right to govern, and there shouldn't be people who are born rich just because their parents were, or born I shouldn't say rich. They shouldn't be people who are born in a higher class system just because their parents were. Okay, everyone is created equal is becoming a very popular mantra stated by John Locke. So during the Enlightenment period, the church really started not liking a lot of what was going on, and also many governments didn't, because those governments were, monarchies, and they didn't like that they're trying to say that monarchies are evil and that the people have a right to govern themselves. So many of the Enlightenment period scholars, they went over to Netherlands where religious freedom was very much acceptable. Okay, so we have secularism, and this is the idea that the church and the state should be separate. Secularism requires the governments respect freedom of religion. Governments should not give special preference to any particular religion. Political decisions must be based on reason after that religious belief, rather than religious beliefs. And you have people like Jeremy Bentham, John Locke, Voltaire, were influential Enlightenment secularists. So people are seeing the evil that and the oppression that can come when the government and a church are together. And so now they have this movement where people say, no, there should be secularism. And secularism, it has a different meaning than it does then than it does today. But secularism are people that believe that church and state should always be separate. So natural rights, we have a man by the name of Thomas Hobbes, and he believed that people, if people want to live peacefully, they're going to have to give up some natural rights. And John Locke thought that the three most important natural rights are life, liberty, and property. So Hobbes published a book called the Leviathan. Leviathan is supposed to be a very powerful sea creature. He calls it Leviathan. It's in 1651. Hobbes wrote that without government, human life would be nasty, brutish, and short. To escape this natural misery, humanity accepts a social contract with a sovereign authority to ensure peace and protection. So in a nutshell, Hobbes is saying, look, life is tough, okay? And if we don't have a sovereign, if we don't have somebody at the top who's protecting and making the decisions, then life is going to be much harder than if you didn't have one. So he believed that the best way to have your most chance of success and survival in life is to open up a social contract with a sovereign and say, we accept your authority as long as you give us peace and protection. John Locke, however, he had a couple theories. One, he had a theory of the social contract himself. He had a theory of toleration, belief that all men were created free and equal, belief in the separation of church and state, and empiricism, using experience to find truth. So John Locke proposed that people have the natural right to life, liberty, and property. In his book, Two Treatises of Government, Locke states that if a government fails to uphold these natural rights, then the people have the right to rebel and overthrow the government. I want to make this clear. Locke says there's a contract going on. He calls it the social contract. And it is, look, if the leaders of that government fail to give and uphold the natural rights of the people, then those people, by natural rights, have the right to rebel and overthrow that government and put in one that's best suited for them. Locke's social contract suggests that people and government are bound to each other by consent. Locke's theory of the consent of the governed contrasts with the divine right of kings. Okay, the consent of the governed is pretty much, what do the people want? That's what we go with. That's not how kings rule. Kings rule with, what do I want if I'm the king, right? The concept of social contract underlies the principles of the United States of America. At the time of the Enlightenment period, religious persecution was common throughout Europe. In 1689, John Locke wrote a letter concerning toleration, which argued that governments should tolerate different religions and called for the separation of church and state. As a result of this work, the British Parliament passed the Toleration Act of 1689, which granted a limited freedom of religion. Locke's theories of toleration were later incorporated into the Bill of Rights. Voltaire, Francois Marie Arouet, I'm not sure if I'm even saying his last name. I don't know him by his real name, guys. I know him by Voltaire because that's how everyone knows him. He was an important French Enlightenment thinker who influenced the American and French revolutions. Voltaire was famous for his sense of humor. He often used humor to criticize the Catholic Church and the French political establishment. He poked fun at the church many times with plays that he wrote, like Candide, etc. Um, Voltaire was a strong supporter of natural rights, especially freedom of religion. Voltaire's most famous book, Candide, was which made fun of the philosophy of optimism. That is the idea that the world is perfect, that everything that happens is the best for you. So Voltaire's going to go into, he's going to get very outspoken, and he's going to get arrested. He's going to get exiled, and he's going to be kicked out of France for quite some time. Okay, he's going to take some refuge in England until all this could pass over, at least. We have Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So Rousseau believed that the best democracy is the one in which people make the laws directly and not through any representative body. So he believed in a direct democracy. He didn't want a republic, a representative body representing the people. Rousseau believed that citizens should submit to a government following the general will of the people as a whole. In this respect, his philosophy differs from Locke, who believed that an individual's natural rights could not be abandoned as they are inalienable. Rousseau believed that the primary role of government is to enforce the laws that the people make. So Rousseau says the only reason or the main reason why government is around is to make sure that the laws that the people make are enforced. Sounds reasonable. Montesquieu. Montesquieu popularized the idea that a democracy should be governed by a separation of powers called tripartite system. Montesquieu was inspired by ancient Greeks and Roman models of government and by the British constitutional system. James Madison was directly influenced by Montesquieu when he included the tripartite system and the principle of checks and balance in the U.S. Constitution. I'm going to give you just a little bit more information here because I think it's important. So Montesquieu is saying, look, we need to have, tripartite is separation, tripar means, triple. So you have three separate systems going. In America, those three separate systems or branches of government are legislative, executive, and judicial. Those are supposed to be three very separate branches, not to combine with each other. Because if they kind of combine, then power starts to circle around one or many branches at one time. You don't want that. You want power to constantly be separated, because if power starts to get centralized, then oppression can happen. So Montesquieu looked at the Roman government and said, look, the Roman government, they had three branches as well. They had the magistrate, the Senate, and the assembly. Those were their three branches. So Montesquieu advocates for three branches. James Madison, who, if you remember, he was a president of our country, okay? James Madison loves these ideas from Montesquieu and says he's right. We need to have everything separate. We need to have, as what he says, checks and balances, which was placed in the Constitution. Mary Wollstonecraft, she's very famous, especially for the women's suffrage movement. This is a gal who she wrote novels. She's included in the French Revolution history. In 1792, she published Vindication of the Rights of Women. Wollstonecraft advocated equal rights for men and women. Her two novels, Mary, a Fiction and Maria, or The Wrongs of Woman, criticized traditional women's roles. Wollstonecraft believed that equal education would bring equality between the sexes. So she is a strong advocate for women's rights. She's considered pretty much the mother of this whole movement, and of course, it's after she dies, a lot of her the literature that she left behind is going to inspire many people, especially in England, to start what's called the women's suffrage movement, which will eventually allow them to receive those they'll keep moving in the direction of equal rights as the men have, and all that will eventually come to the United States, where they it will actually become an amendment to the Constitution. So a lot of really good things to talk about, a lot of cool ideas. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on some of these ideas. Go ahead and write that one-page summary, and we'll go ahead and we'll discuss it at the first of the week. So until then, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.